on this is that imagine if in Islam the only punishment for murder was to take your life, that there was nothing else. The idea that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave an option that you can either seek qisas or either you can settle for diya, which is, the financial amount, or either if you want you can just forgive without anything, right? The fact that you have that option in itself is a mercy and leniency from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Otherwise, the only punishment would be that you committed murder. Now the only way Allah will forgive you is that if your life would be taken. But rather Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala balanced it. That no, there is another option. If you can convince the relatives, the blood relationships of the other person, and if they forgive you, if they're willing to let you go, okay, then that's an option. You don't have to necessarily be killed in order for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive you for what you have done. You can go through this system as well. So there's leniency even in that. So one thing, what I mentioned in the beginning, is that Islam, implemented these concepts as a deterrence to crime in society. Now, a lot of times, there's a big movement also. A lot of times, we see these movements in different parts of the world where people are calling for the end of the death penalty, and the death penalty by default is somehow seen as something very barbaric. It's seen as something really, really bad, and that there should be no death penalty altogether, and it should be abolished. Now, Islam would take a very, very different position on this. No, while Islam would encourage mercy, Islam would encourage leniency, but at the same time, as part of being fair to the other side, Islam will leave the option of retaliation and the option of fairness and the option of taking the life of the other person in the hands of the other people, meaning in the hands of the blood relationships of other people. I mean, you have to think about it from a standpoint of the people who have been wronged. You can't think of it from the standpoint of your own humanity. You see? It's one thing from the standpoint of my own humanity. I might think, oh man, that person, he committed murder. Maybe you should just let him go. I might feel that way because I'm not the one who's been wrong. I'm not the one whose relative has been killed or son has been killed or him. But you have to look at justice from the standpoint of the one who has been where the crime has been done to. So from that standpoint, Islam would encourage leniency and softness and mercy, but leave the option to the other side that, okay, this is fair. If you want to demand death penalty, you can still demand it. You have the right to do that. So that right still, goes to the other side. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, وَلَكُمْ فِي الْقِصَاصِ حَيَاةٌ